Welcome to the AA Podcast, our little corner of the web where we are not afraid to discuss tough questions like,
when did nutrition, health, movement, and stress management become alternative medicine?
Where we embrace challenges in all aspects of life to become healthier and stronger versions of ourselves.
And where food and movement are the best kind of medicine, and cooking meals at home is a revolutionary act.
Welcome back to another episode of the AA Podcast with Ashley Olson
and Andrea Crane.
We are so excited to have you back to this episode. This is going to be potentially off topic for some of our listeners. They might be a little surprised, but honestly, Andrea and I find this episode discussion to be right in line with everything that we're all about. So we're excited to get into that. So before we introduce
I think this applies to everyone, and if it doesn't apply to someone, they just need to go down to the pound and remedy the situation.
Exactly. So before we get into things, as always, we're going to be sharing a Bible verse with you guys, one that either brought a smile to our face, which I think both of these did today, either spoke to us this week, or just something that we found motivational and inspiration to share with you. But my verse is Matthew 6:26, and it says, "Look at the birds of the air, for they neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not more valuable than they?"
I love that one. And so mine is a little tongue-in-cheek, if one can say that about a Bible verse.
I think the Bible has so many tongue cheeks.
Yeah, you're right. Okay.
Yeah.
So mine is Genesis 1:30. And given the topic today, I think this is funny. And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat. And it was so. We're laughing because we've been talking about this for the last hour and a half before we recorded this. So
when we mentioned that we like to talk specifically to each other, but I don't think we could ever run out of things to talk about.
I don't either.
But anyway, so I think we can. Well, you were saying we've been talking about for the last hour and a half. Sorry, I cut you off.
Mm-hmm. Oh no, I was just saying we are well steeped in this topic, and we have been getting into it for a lot of minutes now. So we'll invite you guys into the conversation, and we're going to be talking about proper care and feeding, species-specific diet, species-appropriate diet to your furry friends, specifically your canines.
Yes. Neither Andrea or cat people. So, but this does not mean that it doesn't apply to cats. So we're not only talking about dogs, but specifically we are talking about dogs, like basically how we feed our dogs. And I want to give a little backstory because I might need to let my dog out.
It's
please hold, and I will be right back. All right, so we were so inconveniently interrupted by said canine.
Raven had to go.
I wanted to give a little background to my, I guess, introduction to this topic. So what we're going to talk about today is raw food diet for your dogs. And I guarantee most of our listeners who have never either heard of this or have considered this are thinking those two are crazy. There
Maybe.
is no way I would do this for my dog. And I will say I was right there with you. When I met Andrea, I don't even know how it came about, but I think she was having to go pick up your food, probably. She's like, oh,
Probably so.
I gotta go pick up their dog food. And I was like, oh, what do you feed your dogs? And so she told me that she buys raw dog food from the co-op. And I was like, you're crazy. Like, there is absolutely no way I'm doing that. And so I don't know, it's probably maybe even a year later sorry, my dog just came in running with her stick. She is very happy right now, but that I said, okay, I'll try this. So at the time, I believe my dogs were 7 years old. They had been on a kibble diet ever since they were puppies, right? After being weaned from their mom. And so Andrea warned me, she's like, start slow. But I had started slow, but I didn't know what slow meant, to be honest. And honestly, as I was telling Andrea earlier, it was not truly an interest of mine at the time. I didn't understand the benefits or potential that it could have on my dogs. And so I was just kind of doing it to entertain her and almost prove her wrong that this was healthier. So
not the first or the last time.
Yeah. And as much as I try to might disprove her on other things, she always seems to be correct on a lot of things. So, but I started small. I gave them their kibble and what I would consider a dollop or whatever on top of their food. They ate it up like crazy. They were super happy. But I will tell you that what came after that, I would not.
Oh my gosh.
I would not ever put that on my dog food ever again, because it was all over my house.
I remember the phone call I got from you. It was just absolute panic. My dogs are pooping all over the house. It was terrible.
And this is not
really bad.
Poops. Like, this is pure on diarrhea. Like,
oh gosh.
And I was like, what have you done? This is the worst thing you've ever suggested. And so I dismissed that for after that. Well, fast forward to, what was that, 4 years later, Ghost Rider developed nose cancer. And so just with my knowledge of the human body, I truly believe food is medicine for the canines as well. And so I started researching, some diets that I do for Ghost Rider. I was not going to do raw again, just because I had PTSD, but I did crock pot meals.
Poop traumatic stress disorder.
Exactly.
Sorry.
So I did crock pot meals, and he loved them at first, but obviously with cancer, he had good and bad days. But all that to say, it kind of reintroduced the idea for me. And so after, so when we got Raven, when we knew we were getting ready for a dog, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it the right way. And I'm going to see what this could look like for us. And so I did a ton of research, and kind of going off what Andrea had given me. And that was kind of the first steps. And I just went into a complete research frenzy, basically. And so
you really did.
And so I found this book. I found the website first. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with Dr. McCullough. He is, how would you describe him? A holistic.
Yeah, I would say he's maybe a more reputable Dr. Oz. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how you describe the guy, but yeah, he's kind of a brilliant guy. Lots of eclectic topics. So yeah, pretty holistically minded.
Yeah. So I knew about him. My mom has followed him for years. And I just in the corner of my mind remembered, you know what? I think he has a dog division. And so that's kind of where I started. And so this is where I found Dr. Karen Becker. Sorry, my dog is playing, and there's nothing we can
It's
do about it. I'm glad
She's
it's
having a good
this.
time.
I'm glad it's this episode, but it's
Uh-huh.
Dr. Karen Becker and Rodney Habib, and the book is called Forever Dog. I highly recommend anybody read it. It is fascinating. I will say the first 6 chapters, after like the first couple chapters, you're like, okay, we'll get to the good stuff. Like, what do I need to just do? But honestly, the first 6 chapters of this book is pure history. And it's amazing seeing where, you know, natural, where dogs were naturally, several hundred years ago to when it really started kind of going downhill. And what's fascinating about this book, and I think what correlates so well with, what we are all about, is it gives the history of humans as well. So it's showing how, as humans, we've become fast food, higher processed, looking for things that have more longevity on shelves. Our dog food also translate correlated, timing wise.
Yeah, and I think another way to say that is that food has become the lowest common denominator. What is the fastest, cheapest way that we can make both human food and dog food?
Absolutely. And how can I just go buy a bunch of stuff, stick it in the pantry or my dog food container, and I don't have to worry about it soiling
Right,
for,
right.
weeks or months at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I started researching, and we've chosen to go completely raw. The turning point for us was we had only had Raven for not even a week, and I had just gotten some puppy food from Costco, to be honest, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to hold this over until I can do some more research. And within just like 5 days of feeding her, she was itching uncontrollably, was super just irritated at something. I didn't know what it was. And so I was like, you know what? So I started Googling, what could this be? And I was like, does she have an allergy? Maybe she's got allergies to the pollen outside. And that's one thing that I pulled up. That's the top thing for dogs itching and biting their feet. She was biting her paws. Is food allergies. And I was like, you know what? This is my sign that I just need to go all in. And I did. And I know that's not possible for everybody. And we're going to talk about that. But she, within 3 days of changing her diet, she stopped itching.
She's literally, I wish you guys could see this. Raven is up on her lap, biting her headphones.
She's a little. You're tired, and you get grumpy when you get tired. Yes.
Oh my gosh, she's naughty.
So she, within 3 days of changing her food, and I'll be honest, with the first day that I changed her food, it was just all I had at home was a can of chicken and a can of literally what I had.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I'm gonna go on to my research tonight and I'll figure it out, but for the next couple days at least, this is what we can feed her. And so that's what I did. And within 3 days of just starting with that and then doing the raw food diet, once I got all the ingredients, she stopped itching, stopped biting her feet. She was a totally different dog. And the telltale sign for me was Christian saying, oh my gosh, she's not itching anymore. Like, he noticed the difference.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? This is worth it for us to make this massive switch. So that's how I got introduced to it. How did you get introduced to it?
Okay, so the way that I got into raw feeding was probably 12 or 13 years ago, and it was very much in keeping with, my own health crisis that was going on, and I was, really in that time of reflection and research and considering, I didn't want to be on these drugs and I didn't see a way out. And so as I was starting to change my own diet and life as a result of doing so, I had this dog that was yearly losing all of his hair in response to some kind of allergen that was in the environment in the spring going into summer, and it was just getting worse. So he didn't suffer with this as a puppy, but as the years went by, he started getting this every year, and he would literally lose every hair on his head and then scratch himself bloody. So it was really a sad situation. And the vet's only answer for this, like humans, is steroids. Of some form or another. And for dogs, really all that you can do is give them an oral or a systemic steroid. And then kind of deal with the ramifications of that later on, which for animals that are highly prone to cancer in today's society, that's exactly what steroids do. They suppress the immune system, and then cancers develop. So anyway, I started doing some research, um, and just wondering if I could make the same kind of headway with the dog that I had made with myself, in my own health issues. And sure enough, I stumbled into this kind of crazy community of raw feeders, and it just immediately made sense to me. And they were talking about these species appropriate diets, and I thought, well, yeah, I mean, that makes all the sense in the world. Look at a dog's teeth sometime. If you ever have any question as to what these things should be eating, look at their teeth. I mean, they're just designed to rip and tear, and that is very much in keeping with a meat-based diet. And so I found I found a co-op that was just starting, and it was, I don't know, some obscure, no, it wasn't a Facebook group, it was a Yahoo group. Did anybody remember Yahoo groups? Oh my gosh, these are so old. But yeah, there was a Yahoo group that was in this super cumbersome chat room, and it was just a terrible format. But I met all these people, and they were just starting to order food from a company based in Wisconsin. And so I signed up, said, "Hey, let's do it. I'll be a part of this." And so we would get shipments of raw dog food, that was sent to us in either these tubes or like these 50-pound flats. And so, yeah, anyway, more on that here in a little bit. But I started feeding it to both my dogs at that time, and the one, his allergies just miraculously cleared up. I mean, their coats were healthy and shiny. Their teeth, we started reversing tartar on their teeth. It was really extraordinary, the changes that took place. And I've been feeding raw ever since. And so and I can get into the company that these co-ops buy from, and I can kind of get into the system around the country that orders from them and how this all works. But um, I just want to say, um, uh, this episode, Ashley is kind of the expert on the whole raw feed thing from the ground up, because Ashley makes her own while I buy a commercially available product. And so I think today we just wanted to tell people, what options are out there. Because if you start dabbling in raw feeding and you start looking into this, one, you will get so much pushback from sort of the conventional wisdom, as it were. Um, and not only so, but then when you start looking at companies and raw food options, it is unbelievably expensive. Like, you will spend more money on your dogs than you will on your kids. So that is untenable for most people. It would be for me. And so, I for one, and Ashley too, had to figure out some way to make this affordable for our family's situations. And, we've both come up with options that work really, really well for us.
Absolutely. And I also want to stress too that you do not need to necessarily go from 0 to 100 on the raw food diet.
Exactly.
That is
And you can't.
no.
You can't, because once you've fed kibble, and we're not going to get too far into the weeds in terms of she's she's just chiming in. We're not going to get too far into the weeds about kibble and what it does to a dog, because frankly, that's what some people can afford, and that is what they're going to feed their dog, and that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. We're not here to shame anybody for their choices. But the fact is, it's
I don't know if you guys can hear this. She's so mad at me right now. So Christian's out hunting. And so I'm single dog parenting over here, okay? And she is not about it. So anyway, we're just gonna move on because we can't keep interrupting this. But no, it is. It's is it too loud?
No.
Oh.
I mean, I can hear myself.
Okay.
So I think the important thing to say is that, this is just for people if you want some information. And so it's not this game where it's you either spend $1,000 a month on raw feeding your dog or you feed them trash kibble. That there are so many things that are in between, and
Absolutely.
you can always do a little bit better than what you're doing now. And so if somebody wants to do that, then we want to give you information.
Absolutely. And also to the point of how I treat my clients, and I believe how Andrea treats hers, is what can we do to just make it maybe even just 1% better? Like we don't need to make all the drastic changes. One, more than likely, you as a human won't change all those things and keep to them, and you're not going to do that for yourself. Then more than likely, you're not going to do this for your canine either. So,
right.
Some of the pushback that is probably pretty popular with a raw food diet is it sanitary?
Right. Well, of
not
course.
sanitary, but like what about bacteria? Well, it's sanitary, but bacteria, like how is this not going to destroy our dog? And if Ashley's saying her dog at 7 years old was literally crapping all over her house, like how is that good? And we can go back to even just humans. I mean, even I believe it was our second episode of the autoimmunity where you were talking about the entry of the digestive tract, the duodenum.
Yep, you got it.
And how, like, my question was, well, is anything absorbed? And so, so as we're starting to change our diet, our own stool is going to be fluctuating quite a bit because our body is like, oh my gosh, these are new nutrients. Like, what do I do with these? I don't have the gut microbiome to handle these yet.
Yes, let's talk about that briefly. So, you're exactly right. When we make big changes to our own diets, you absolutely see a difference in stooling patterns, stool consistency, etc. And often there will be some digestive discomfort, some gastric distension. You can get bloating, all kinds of things while your body adjusts. Now, dogs are no different. And so when we make drastic changes, and this is to your point, you said, don't go from 0 to 100 because that can really throw your dog's digestion into a tailspin, literally, because because they don't have the diversity of microbial organisms in their gut. They don't have it to be able to properly digest the food that you're giving. And so if you do it low and slow, then then that diversity will increase naturally.
Absolutely. And the reason why I think I could switch Raven over so fast was she was only 10
Mhm.
weeks old.
That is
She had
absolutely why.
she had maybe at best 4 weeks on a
Mm,
kibble diet, and probably honestly she was still nursing for
mm,
some of it. So there was that transition period. So
yeah.
the reason why my 7-year-old dogs couldn't transition, and
Mm,
looking back, I should have done it even slower than I thought. But uh they had that many years. So back to the point of what
right.
we were talking about in our autoimmunity, when you have somebody that might be 16 that has
Mhm,
been diagnosed with an autoimmunity, it is
mhm.
more than likely so much quote unquote easier to help them drastically change
Yeah.
their life and avoid a lot of those damaging effects that autoimmunity
Mhm.
has. Same thing for dogs. Like, and then if you have like a 40 or 50 or 60-year old that has now developed these autoimmunities, you have that much time of trying to fix the problem. It didn't just
Right.
show up at 60 years old. It's been brewing for all
Brewing.
those years.
Mhm.
And so same thing for dogs, and obviously dog years are different, than human years. And so if you have a 7-year-old dog, that's decades in the
Yeah.
human's life of
Yeah.
basically damage to their
Right.
microbiome.
Right. And sometimes, like, if you don't catch these things early enough, sometimes despite your best efforts, you've got irreversible damage there.
Hmm.
But that's also okay, because there's always improvements that can be made. But generally, the rule of thumb is, if you've got an adult dog that's going to transition over to raw, you want to do it slowly. Now, I will also say, there are a lot of people that have forgotten more about raw feeding than I will ever know. They really espouse separating kibble from raw food,
Mm.
and so they don't. Oh my! There go my dogs.
Well,
Wow.
welcome to the club.
I know. The poorly behaved dogs club. Um, yeah, so they would say, and I would agree with this, that the transit time for kibble versus the transit time for raw foods are so different. So basically, that's the time that it takes to get from mouth to anus. So how long does it take that food to go all the way through the digestive tract? And they say that kibble is so much slower than raw food, that you don't want to feed those two in the same meal together.
And funny you mentioned that, because the chapter that I'm reading, I'm almost done with this book. So um, there is a person, Dr. Lee Strogdale, that says dogs are psychologically adapted to eat everything, raw or cooked,
Mm.
meat, green, and vegetables, sometimes after rolling in it. Research
Yes.
conclusively demonstrates there is no negative digestive consequences for humans or dogs having both raw and cooked protein, fat, and carbs in one meal. So
Mm.
this guy has debunked that, I guess, that
Well,
theory.
I would say that's different than feeding extruded food like kibble.
Okay.
So I would not. I would agree with that. That
Okay.
feeding cooked chicken and raw chicken in the same meal is fine.
Okay.
But I think there's a difference between feeding kibble and chicken in the same meal. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Um, yeah. So yeah, if you're trying to transition your dog over to raw, I would probably I think most people feed twice a day. I think that's the recommendation. Um, and so I would do one meal raw and one meal kibble. And maybe, make that raw food maybe cooked.
Yes.
Just so, yeah.
So that's a suggestion for people that have been interested that I've talked to. I was like, honestly, I would go with a low temperature, slow cooked
Mhm.
raw food, beef. Well, then it's not raw, but a slow cooked. And we're gonna get into the temperature of their food too. But um, a slow cooked, like a
Food.
boil. You can boil it. So boiled
Mhm.
chicken, crock pot, and then dehydrated. Obviously,
Mm.
is one too. But and start them off as that because it's going to be a lot less shocking to their system.
Right.
hmm
Right.
And
Absolutely.
now this book does not necessarily talk or uh, negatively encourage you, I guess, to not mix them. So what they talk about is food toppers.
Mm.
So
Okay, yeah.
they now, however you do it, the same the same end point is go slow, like
Right.
go slow, and slow means slow. Um, and
Mhm.
so go from giving them their regular size kibble, and then maybe start giving them treats like cooked
Mhm.
slow cooked chicken, or some low temperature ground beef, or, something that's been cooked at a lower temperature. So the big thing
Mhm.
with the temperature, since we're talking about that, is the temperature that our food is cooked. And you can get more into the carcinogens, right,
Mhm.
of that. But whenever you cook a food, specifically speaking about dogs, their body doesn't, the temperature that it's cooked at, if it's a lower temperature, they're able to absorb more of those nutrients. Whereas if it's higher cooked, so flash cooked, like grilled
High
or high
temperature. Mhm.
temperature, then they're going to get less of those nutrients.
Yeah, and the explanation for that is, there are vitamins, there are cofactors, there are enzymes, there are proteins, and all of which are denatured or torn apart um, by the high temperature cooking. And
hmm
so by low temp, or just barely cooking something versus frying the snot out of it, yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's much better. And honestly, it's better for us too, but our palates like a good char on a
Right.
steak. So, yeah.
Exactly. So something that you could easily do if you're wanting to entertain this idea is what I did for Ghost Rider was I did a crock pot chicken. So I got some chicken breasts, and then got some green beans, some raw green beans. You could do some coconut oil with it. So they're getting some of those good fats. And then just cook that up. And then maybe just
Mhm.
use that as a treat to begin with.
Mhm. Mhm.
Small portions throughout the day or throughout the week, maybe every other day, even. See how your
Mhm.
dog adjusts to that, and then continue giving them their kibble.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is if you're not wanting to transition completely to this side of things, then you can just use the recipe as a topper for your meal. So continue with the kibble, and then just give them a little bit extra of these nutrients.
Yeah, and if you find that your dog is not tolerating it well, then I suspect that there would be some mismatch with transit time if you're using those toppers and things are not going well.
Okay.
If you hear a lot of like super loud gurgling in their belly, then they're probably getting some bloating. If they're having loose stool, if they are, I mean, God forbid, if they are stooling in the house, then there probably is a mismatch on the transit time, and so I would separate those.
Yeah.
But if your dog can tolerate it, then yeah, get the nutrition in where you can. And I also wanted to bring up, I think uh, one of the areas of probably strongest pushback to raw feeding is this anthropomorphized dilemma about bacterial infections, and food poisoning, as we would call it. And so people really freak out about, well, I wouldn't eat a raw chicken leg, so why would I feed that to my dog? Well, you know what? Your dog will go out into the middle of the road and eat a 3-day-old robin that got hit like 72 hours ago, and will be none worse the wear for it. So we can't throw these human issues at our canines, because they are adapted to eat some really pretty disgusting things and and survive quite well. Their digestive tracts are shorter than ours, and so that food goes barreling through there so fast that they are not prone to the same kinds of food poisoning that we are.
Absolutely.
And so even though it sounds crazy, like why on earth would you feed raw food? That sounds like a bacterial disaster. However, I would invite you to just do a quick internet search on food poisoning gotten from kibble. There are so many kibble and treat recalls on these highly processed, extruded foods. It'll blow your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And if you really pay attention, I'd say about every 3 to 6 months. My goodness, there they go. Every 3 to 6
We were
months.
talking about them today.
They really do. There's nothing out front. I don't know. They're just being naughty. But yeah, so that's not really an issue. That is a straw man argument. And so if that's what people are telling you, I would just encourage you, don't start a fight with anybody, but just go do your own research on that and try it out.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And also to note too, dogs are considered, like you had mentioned in your notes, omnivores, but they don't really need that many carbs. And when we're talking carbs, we're not talking grains, we're talking vegetables, berries, fruit. So technically, the only things that dogs should never have are onions, grapes, and raisins. So, and what were you gonna add?
A chocolate and is garlic in there? I've heard that
so
all
garlic
alliums
is no longer considered. It is
okay.
It is actually very safe for them.
Cool. Okay.
Now I will say the kind of garlic. I wouldn't go give your dog a garlic clove.
Raw garlic, probably not good.
But minced garlic, some garlic powder, stuff like that is totally fine. But chocolate for some dogs is toxic.
Mm-hmm.
But not all dogs. But it's one of those ones that you don't know until you know. So best not to give it to them.
Sure. Yeah.
So I would avoid those too, or avoid chocolate. But yeah, garlic is actually pretty good for them.
Okay. Well, that makes sense.
And so if you guys are interested, what I have found to be such a great resource is it's called Bark and Whiskers. And that's their Instagram. You can go to their website too, but their Instagram is always really cool because they'll just do a food, like, I don't know if it's a day or whatever, but they'll give a food and they'll give the benefits for canines and felines. And then they'll also talk about, like, for example, they did one on garlic and that it was previously believed that it was toxic to them, but now they actually show that it's actually really good for them.
Cool.
But when we are talking about carbs, we're talking about vegetables and fruits. It is not necessary that your dog have grains. Right.
Yeah, dogs. So unlike cats are actually obligate carnivores. They have taurine requirements that have to be met with meat. That is a non-negotiable. Now, dogs can eat carnivore, but they are more, I guess, more accurately considered omnivores, like we are, except that dogs run very, very well on a high meat diet. Small amounts, like Ashley mentioned, small amounts of fruits, specific fruits like berries, low sugar fruits, always better than high sugar fruits. Oh, Raven. And so I would always recommend, if somebody wants to do this super easy, my resource it's a company called Ross Wells, and I can kind of go into the history of that, and then you can tell folks maybe what you do in order to feed that that monster in the background. Oh my gosh. So yeah, so the company that I have used now in 2 states, they're called Ross Wells, and you can do a quick Google search and find them, but they're out of Medford, Wisconsin. So historically, they used to provide a sled dog blend for the Iditarod teams. And so they used to use 3 or 4D meat. And for those of you uninitiated with 3D, 4D meat, it is dead, diseased, down, or dying. And I know that sounds horrendous. But again, remember what we're talking about here. We're talking about wolf ancestors. We're talking about like coyote cousins. And so these are the animals that go out and they eat carrion. They eat dead animals and suffer no ill effects. And so they are designed to have that food in their repertoire. And so if you've got a cow at a feedlot that is dead, diseased, down, or dying, then that animal can actually quite safely go into the pet food line, and out of the human chain of food. And so that's what they used to do. Now they no longer make sled dog blends, and the other change is they only use human grade meat now. Okay, so that makes the product a little more expensive. But think about this. Can you know how expensive it is to eat carnivore just as a human, right? It's outrageously expensive. So imagine feeding, those of us that have big dogs, imagine feeding, human grade meat to a sled dog team. I mean, good heavens, that would eat you out of house and home. So what they do use human grade meat. However, they will denature it, and they add some things. They add there's some oil in there, like some wheat germ oil. There is some, oh, I forget. We could put a link to some labels here in the show notes if people want to take a look at it. But they have several blends that they make, and it is just phenomenal dog food. I've fed, these are my 3rd and 4th dogs that I have fed this blend to in the last, actually, no, these are my 5th and 6th dogs. So we've been doing this for a long time. And so the way that these groups run is that they pool their orders together, and then we order from one centralized company. And then that gets trucked from Wisconsin to all over the United States to these co-ops that order the dog food. And they're usually found in larger cities. And so people get together, and then we separate our own orders. Like, it literally comes off the truck with a forklift on pallets. And then we organize ourselves to separate it out, and then we all take our own orders home. And so if you can find a co-op like this, I would strongly recommend that, if you don't have the time or the inclination maybe to make your own food, this is a wonderful and hugely important. It is an economical way to feed your dogs raw, and we've been able to afford this just because of this co-op situation. So it's a great option for folks, and you should be able to contact the company directly. They've got a direct line to all of the co-op groups in the country, and they can kind of steer you towards someone that might be in your area.
That's awesome. Yeah, I definitely need to look into this for us as well, just for, honestly, for sake of ease, in terms of time. I mean, it's going to take time.
It might be good to have something on hand just in the freezer. If you're ever running short on time, then you can just get this out and not have to make her food. So
right. Now, I think you put in our show notes what's
I
in this.
Yes, I did. There it is.
And so I was just curious. So I know raw bones are super important for our dog's
Mhm.
health. Now,
Mhm.
are the chicken or beef when they list those out, is that including their bones?
That's a really good question. And sometimes that information is a little hard to suss out. Now, I would say no, I don't think this is a whole chicken product, and I don't think it's a whole beef product because they've also included bone meal in this preparation. Now, they do offer some products that are whole chicken. So that includes the organ meat, that includes the bones, that includes everything in the grind. Um, but for this particular one, this one of the formulations that we feed personally, it has bone meal in it, and so I would think that that's probably an additive.
Or do you find that bone meal is sufficient?
Oh, yeah, yeah, and here's the deal. Some of this, I don't run DEXA scans on my dogs to see what
You
their bone
don't?
density. I know, I'm a terrible mother. But there's not a lot of lab work that I do on my dogs. My dogs, frankly, don't get a lot of medical care. I feed them the very best food that I can afford, and then we just love them up and give them great spoiled lives. But they don't get a lot of medical care unless there's something acute that happens, obviously, and then we take them in. But my dog's teeth are perfect. There is no tartar on those teeth. Their coats, when people come over, they always say, "Oh, you must have just had a bath." Well, no, they didn't. My dogs have never had a bath in their lives. We don't do dog baths, but their coats are shiny and soft and healthy, and they smell great. And when they poop, it's like coyote poop out there in the yard because they're eating the same kinds of things that wild dogs eat. And so they're so efficient at digesting this food that there's very little left over for waste. So
That's
yeah.
something that we noticed right away too,
Mm-hmm.
was Raven was going maybe 4 or 5 times a day,
Uh,
and it went down to like 2 for a while. And I was like,
yeah.
oh shoot, is she constipated? And then obviously the
Right.
more I was reading, I was like, no, she's actually absorbing her food. She's actually getting
Mm-hmm.
more of the nutrients. So she's, yeah. And I saw Andrea too when we were chatting before this, like when Christian mows, we only have to really mow our yard maybe 4 times a year at best. And like when he mows, like he doesn't even see it. And it's because it's like coyote poop. It just like disintegrates, like it just
Mm-hmm.
goes away.
Yeah.
So it's amazing. So something that so I do something probably totally different. I'm probably the bougie mother over here, but I have
No.
it when I first did it, I will say it took me several hours, and I was like, I don't know if I can do this. But I have become more efficient. I've learned how to not literally chop everything up myself.
Mm.
And so I have been using a recipe that the Forever Dog .com recipe has, and it's specifically for growing puppies. And so what I do is I literally buy so this last time I did ground chicken, ground beef. I do beef liver. I do carrots, broccoli,
Mhm.
mushrooms. And I do sardines, which I never thought a sardine would enter my home,
Mhm.
but they do now. And they're very interesting. I did not realize. So I was blending them up in the blender. I didn't realize that they just
Oh, Ashley.
disintegrate.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
I know.
No, if you knew this person sitting across the screen from me, the fact that she is talking about touching liver or sardines, that is real transformation.
Yeah. And then I do some blueberries, flaxseed, and then just from my spice drawer, I do some oregano, thyme, and basil. And one thing I haven't added think it was in your dog food, is kelp. So that's something I have not added. And then I do a zinc substitute or supplement, sorry. And then I'll do every other day, every few days, I'll do a D-mannose powder, either in her water or on her food, and some turmeric. And I'm just doing it like just for changing it up for her. I don't think there are benefits. I will say that, like, you can go down and you can literally, especially this book, it breaks it down of each micronutrient or vegetable and berry that, and what their benefit is for a canine, right? But I think the bulk of what we want to get across is eating more of a whole food diet is going to be more beneficial for your dog, and however you can do that. So
Right.
if that means just doing, every other day a little topper, or maybe doing some treats, then do that. And if that means, there are even raw food diet companies that will freeze dry or dehydrate. I will warn you right now, those are stupid expensive, and that it will probably never happen in my home just because of how insanely expensive it is. But
Amen,
if you're
sister.
not up for that, then you can buy a bag and then just give it as a little topper on their food if that's something that works for you. Raven will literally eat a chicken foot. It's part of her meal twice a day. And she it was hilarious. Like, Andrew got to watch her, and she literally saves it like it's dessert. And then she runs to the living room and she chomps it down, and she's like the happiest little. Anyway, we want to just encourage you to maybe entertain the idea of adding in some whole foods to your dog's diet. And there are definitely ways that you can do that. I know my mom, she actually orders her food through a company called Texas Tripe. Now I believe they only ship to certain states. Yes, they do. And they only do in-person deliveries to certain states. Colorado and Texas are one of them. But you can go to their shipping page. Idaho is listed, but like Kansas is not. So it wouldn't be as good of a resource as the co-op that Andrea was mentioning. The other thing too is kefir. That's a great,
Sure.
if you're not wanting to do any of this and you just want to give some good, kefir is
probiotics.
Kefir is great. Or
And
give them some yogurt. Yeah. Raven will get yogurt.
Make sure that it's plain.
Yes.
But yeah, yogurt is fantastic.
Yes. And then, so those are some simple ways that you can do that. I know I'm still learning. It's still something that I'm diving into it, and I've gotten down my rhythm for now, but as she grows and maybe her diet needs change, I may need to look at something like you're saying, to have on hand these raw food from the commercial producer.
I would say based on what you're telling me, you've really gotten this down to a pretty quick routine.
Yeah.
And so tell people how much time you spend on doing this now.
So I've gotten it down to this time. It took me about 45 minutes, and that will last me for about 2.5-ish weeks. So I'm going to start doing it twice a month for 45 minutes. I got a huge commercial kitchen bowl, and I just throw it all in there, and then I divvy it out. It doesn't take much time. It's literally just throwing ingredients together.
And what do you store it in?
I store it in some very cheap from Walmart little plastic storage to go.
Are they like meal prep containers?
Meal prep containers, yes. Thank you.
Okay.
They were like $2 for 6 of them, and so I got like 25 or 30 of them, and they're reusable. Then I freeze. We keep 1.5 days out at a time. And then and it's in this garage fridge. And so I keep 1.5 days out at a time, and then just pull one every time. So one in, one out, or one out, one in type thing. And it's super easy. And then the food actually may not have 25 of them. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I actually have leftovers of the meat, so I just put the meat meal, whatever I make, and I put those in Ziploc baggies and just freeze them flat. And then so like today I'm gonna pull one of them out, and then by Friday I'll divvy up some extra more meals for her. And so honestly, I might have gotten more than just 2 weeks worth of it, but I'm going to do it 2 weeks at a time, just so I'm constantly just a little bit ahead. So if we were to go out on vacation or something, then I'm not like a week behind, but it's gotten to be the point where it's so easy, and it's kind of nice. Like, you know, you're doing something good for your dog. It's just meal prep for your dog instead of yourself. And it really, in the grand scheme of things, it's not that much time when you know you're benefiting your dog's health better long term, and it could potentially be a long-term money saver, because you're not having to visit the vet all the time. You're not having to get them on allergy meds, steroids, anxiety meds. Like, there's so many things. And you should, like Raven, she doesn't really shed that much. You're getting her compliments on her coat and her teeth. And I know she's still a puppy and very young, but still,
but mine
she doesn't stink.
So. Their breath is not objectionable at all. It's really remarkable, the changes that can take place. And again, we're not saying that, you know, this is the way that you should do it. What we are saying is that there are small changes that can make big differences down the line.
Absolutely. Same for human health, same for your dog's health. So we're going to leave some resources for you in the show notes, and I'll link where I've been getting my stuff, Andrea gets her stuff, and maybe even some of these studies could be interesting for some of the people that want to get really nerdy, but
down into the weeds.
But I have found this book to be fascinating. I would highly recommend anybody that, and it's taken me a while to read. I'm a slow reader, but and the chapters are pretty sizable with a lot of information, but it's fascinating. And I just love it. So I highly recommend it. But definitely follow Bark and Whiskers and Dr. Karen Becker for some, additional information and resources. And then we'll link all that in the show notes. So I think that's all that we have for today. But hopefully you found this episode interesting and hopefully entertaining with all the friggin' dog barking in the background. I'm about ready to pull my hair out right now, but
she just is so upset.
She is beyond words right now. So I will go tend to her. And,
okay.
We will close out this episode, but we're so happy that you joined us for another one of the AA podcast. And we are in the midst of our first ever challenge, and we are super excited about this. If you had missed this opportunity to sign up, please don't feel like you can't. Go ahead and we'll link the challenge in the show notes as well. And we would love for you to join whenever you can. And we will have more of these. So keep ears out for that, since this is a podcast.
Yes.
And we will see you next time.
All right. Bye-bye. The content provided in the AA podcast is intended for informational and educational purposes only. The podcast is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. The information and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute medical advice.